Hi guys, Grand J here and welcome to another one of our videos. Opus 5 for the Final Fantasy trading card game has just released, so now we get to do some set reviews. Today's video will be talking about the fire cards of the new set, so let's get started. First of all, we have Black Mage, which is a free cost 7,000 power forward. For fire dull, put Black Mage into a break zone. All forwards and opponent control cannot block forwards of power inferior to their own this turn. So this effectively gives all your forwards the ability of land for this turn, or if really it just gives your opponent's forwards a debuff that they can't block cards like land this turn. So first of all, it does seem like it's the first forward Black Mage we have received in this game. So there are a couple of little synergies that we've seen from like earlier sets, especially with that Black Mage, that Lightning Black Mage that does deal 8,000 damage if you have a few Black Mages on the field. So this is another way to add to that count. That being said, its body is on curve, and yeah, it is able to give you an effect that allows you to push through, which does seem to be an effect that Fire really wants to push, is this ability of having your forwards unblockable. But land hasn't seen that much play for quite a while, and that's because this effect is actually not as good as you may think, simply because forwards can still block forwards of equal power, so it doesn't guarantee your forwards going to be able to get through. It actually creates situations where your forwards might be trading against forwards of equal power. So this is not a fantastic ability, and you are sort of investing, or you're trading away a free cost forward for this as well. So in this regard, I don't really foresee this card being particularly strong or really seeing much play. Next, we have Red Mage. It is a 2-cost backup for 1 dull. Discard 1 card named Red Mage. Choose on 4. Deal it 5,000 damage. So again, this sort of because it's a Red Mage, it does build into the synergy of this Red Mage that we've seen from Opus 3, where choose on 4, deal 8,000 damage if you control 4 more Red Mage. So it does count towards that. And if you are building that deck, it does give you extra ways that you can use up your Red Mages from your hand. That being said, though, dealing 5,000 damage is a small amount. It basically helps you get your forwards damage high enough to trade against higher power forwards. So yeah, 5,000 damage is not a fantastic amount of damage, but it is on a backup, and it's very rare that we usually see backups deal this much damage without some sort of a larger drawback or a bigger base cost. That being said, though, this effect actually is pretty expensive to use. So you're paying 1, then dulling, so effectively using 2 CP, and then you're discarding another card as well that has to be a Rage Mage. So in effect, you are effectively paying 4 CP to deal 5,000 damage, which is not fantastic, especially since Fire has a lot of removal abilities and a lot of damage spells. Using 4 CP to deal 5,000 damage is pretty lackluster, so I don't think this backup will see that much play unless you're trying to build the gimmicky Red Mage deck. Next, we have Ayame, which is a free cost 7,000 power forward, so it's on curve. It's got Brave, which is pretty good, because Brave is a pretty difficult keyword for forwards to pick up. If you have received 5 points of damage or more, Ayame gets plus 3,000 power, so she goes up to a 10,000 power forward. This card, it seems like there's 2 really sort of archetypes that it's really sort of going to fit into. One is the Earth deck that's reliant on receiving more damage, so that there is a benefit to playing Ayame there. 5 points of damage isn't a particularly high threshold for you to hit, and it doesn't leave you super vulnerable as opposed to like say 6 points of damage. So it's pretty solid. It's like one of those Dark Knight type cards. It does have Brave, so it does give you that inherent defense while also being able to attack as well. Most importantly, so the second archetype that this card might see plays is in Final Fantasy 11. So FF11 actually has quite a lot of support this set. However, there aren't that many FF11 forwards in this game. So yeah, right now it seems to be Ayame, Volker, Prish, and a couple other very niche forwards as well. So I don't think FF11 is going to be able to sort of really build up a deck just yet, simply because there's not that many targets. But potentially in a Fire Earth deck then allows us to have additional targets as Star Sybil, and this card isn't too bad with Volker as well. So this card itself isn't fantastic, but if you do play her, largely it's going to be because of her FF11 category. Next, we have one of the summons for the set, Ifrit. It is a 2-cost summon. EX Burst. Choose 1 forward. You may discard 1 card from your hand named Ifrit. If you do, deal it 10,000 damage. If not, deal it 5,000 damage. So, yeah, so this is like a cheap summon, but obviously if you discard an additional Ifrit, it can bump it up to 10,000, which is a very, very good number to hit. It pretty much will wipe out any forward in the game except for the really, really big forwards. So that's pretty good. Effectively, you're spending 4 CP if you do this. So you are spending 2 CP on this summon, and then you're spending additional 2 CP in the Ifrit that you're discarding as well. So you are spending 4 CP to deal 10,000 damage, so it is actually a pretty solid trade-off. But the problem comes down to its conditionality of you having to have multiple Ifrits in your deck. So probably you'll require more Ifrits on top of this Ifrit that you have here. So this will be probably a free off, and then you have to run at least another 3, possibly 4 other Ifrits in your deck as well. So yeah, the previous Ifrit from Opus 4 is probably going to be an Ifrit that you would consider for this deck. The fact that it's EX burst is pretty solid, but you do have to discard a card if you do want to hit that extra number. So it's actually not bad. Cost-wise, it's pretty solid, and it's an EX burst as well. I definitely can see a world where we're playing a fire deck that's using multiple Ifrits and you're hitting multiple EX burst triggers all the time. So I'm not going to write this card off, but it doesn't seem to really quite jump out at me. It does seem like it's got its potential niche uses, however. Next is Caius. We've already talked about this in some of the earlier spoilers. It is a 4-cost 9,000 power forward that's got Brave. When it's sent from field to break zone, discard 1 card from your hand. 4-cost forwards is a very highly contested slot for most colors. Fire doesn't have too many powerful forwards at the 4-cost slot as compared to some other as compared to some other elements such as like Earth, for example. Caius doesn't really sort of seem to add that much to the fire archetype. Yes, it's got Brave, but there are other ways for fire to get Brave on their forwards. And yeah, its drawback is actually, like, in some situations, the drawback can be non-existent in the fact that if you don't have any cards on the center break zone, then yes, you do not discard the card from your hand. So that's pretty solid. But then yeah, in other scenarios, you might want to be playing Rubicante, or you might want to be playing Sabin, or you might want to play Tifa as well. So I don't really think there's much justification to playing this card. Yeah, the fact that he's a Final Fantasy 13 may give it a couple of bonus points, but otherwise from that, like, I don't think this card is going to see all that much play. Next we got Gadot, which is a 4-cost 8,000 power forward. Forwards cost 2 you control, get plus 2,000 power. When Gadot attacks, choose on forward against haste until the end of turn. So these are actually two pretty solid effects wrapped up in a on-curve body. So it's actually pretty solid as a card. Although the ability of giving your forwards of cost 2, exactly 2 by the way, not 2 or less, plus 2,000 power is a little bit niche. But in fire, it does seem quite manageable. The only other color that I would sort of foresee having a similar sort of like relevance is water, because they do have a couple of synergies with forwards that cost 2 or less as well. So Gadot's first ability is actually alright, considering that there's like quite a lot of fire cards that are at the 2-cost mark that have a lot of bonuses, that have pretty good stats. So cards like the new set's Warrior, also from previous sets having Lednar, he's pretty solid as well. Warrior Light, Cloud, so there are a lot of pretty good like 2-cost forwards just within fire itself. So the first ability can be pretty solid, especially if you're building a more cheaper, potentially like even a Pauper style deck. This card will be a pretty good powerhouse in those as well to give you a lot of tempo. And talking about tempo, whenever he attacks, he can give one of your guys haste, and giving your guys haste is actually one of the most difficult things for most colors to do in this game. So that's actually a really, really good bonus. Especially because fire generally wants to be a more aggressive deck. I can definitely see this card potentially seeing play in more niche sort of fire decks. Next we have Kala. It's a 2-cost backup. It is an Agito cadet, so dull and dull 1 active forward. Choose 1 attacking forward against plus 1,000 power until the end of turn. This effect seems a little bit too niche for my liking. So first of all, you do have to spend 1 CP on like using this backup, but you have to dull 1 active forward. So that's actually a bit of a cost. Dulling 1 of the active forwards makes it unable to attack, or in a lot of cases makes it unable to block as well. So you are giving quite a reasonable advantage for quite a reasonable resource for it. And it says choose 1 attacking forward against plus 1,000 power until the end of turn. Now, this card is probably best compared to a card called Selfie from Opus 2, where you're spending 2 fire and dulling it to give one of your attacking forwards plus 2,000 power. So this card is kind of a cheaper variant on that, in that you're not spending so much CP resources, but you do have to dull 1 active forward as well. That being said, plus 1,000 power is not a super amazing buff. It's like the most minimum buff you can have. Not to say that that isn't relevant, but it does seem quite minimal. And also that it has to be an attacking forward as well. So you can't use it to protect one of your forwards on defense, or you can't really use it to buff up one of you guys in that's being targeted by some sort of destruction or nuke ability. So that being said, this card's effect is actually quite narrow, and its effect is a little bit too niche. Unless we see any sort of reason or any sort of incentive to run these Agito cadets, because there are quite a few Agito cadets from this set. Unless we see some sort of way to sort of push that archetype forward, I don't think this card is going to really see much play until then. Next, we have Royal Ripeness. It is a 5-cost monster, and my mate Chris Mitsuki, he did a video on this card, but I'm going to touch upon it quickly today. So Royal Ripeness cannot be chosen by fire summons or fire abilities. This is actually a pretty niche ability, actually. So yeah, obviously, if you're not facing a fire-based deck, then this first line actually becomes a drawback, in the sense that, like, obviously, if you're playing Royal Ripeness in your deck, you're probably playing a fire deck, or you have fire elements in your deck. So this actually hurts you in that you cannot buff it with your own cards, because yeah, it cannot be chosen by fire summons or fire abilities, full stop. This includes your opponent and yours. So that is effectively a drawback in a large majority of cases. Although, yeah, if fire does become particularly strong in the meta, which I highly doubt at this stage, then potentially this can be an interesting tech card against it. But at this stage, I'm very skeptical that fire is going to be a big part of the meta game. Simply because it doesn't seem like fire's got a huge amount of amazing cards from this set. But talking about its second ability, so for fire, for 1 fire, discard until the end of the turn, Royal Ripeness also becomes a 4 with 9,000 power. When Royal Ripeness attacks, deal 3,000 damage to all forwards and opponent controls. You can only use this ability once per turn. So yeah, so effectively it creates a 9,000 power forward. So the best sort of comparison is Opus 2's Emperor Zan, that was a 9,000 power forward and dealt 5,000 damage whenever it attacked. This deals 3,000 damage, but deals it to multiple forwards. Yeah, in a lot of cases, especially for fire, dealing 3,000 damage to your opponent's forwards, you will in a lot of cases allow the rest of your fire abilities to use nukes or damage abilities to sort of get over the rest of the power as well. So for example, Emperor Zan, it deals 5,000 damage. If you then follow it up with a Royal Ripeness, then it allows you to deal like another 3k, which is 8k in total, which is generally a pretty good number. And a lot of forwards usually deal like 4,000 to 5,000 damage very easily in fire. So this is actually a very good combination with it. That being said, it is a little bit expensive. It does cost 5 though, which does have its pros and cons, which means that certain abilities that abilities that do target larger monsters, such as Alexander, might be able to cause this card some trouble. But in a lot of cases, a lot of the monster removal in this game right now seems to only be targeting monsters that are smaller cost. So it's actually not pretty easy to destroy monsters that are around 2 or 3 costs. Dragon from Lightning, it seems to be one of the few cards that's seeing play that's destroying monsters of 4 or lower. But Royal Ripeness being a 5 cost actually protects it from a lot of those abilities that are removing monsters. So potentially this card can see play, especially in a metagame where we see a lot of sort of mid-range or sort of like lower range monster removal, and a lot of sort of forward removal. Potentially we might see this play. It does have its usefulness, but I'm not sort of really holding my breath on seeing this card seeing that much play anytime soon. Next, we have Grenade, and this is the cycle of 2-cost backups that have like some sort of effect that trigger off when your opponent does something. So in this case, when a forward of your opponent controls, when a forward the forward of your opponent with 8,000 power or less enters the field, put a grenade into a break zone. If you do, deal it 8,000 damage. So effectively, this is just kind of like a landmine in the sense that if your opponent plays a forward that is 8,000 or less damage, 8,000 or less power, you get to deal at 8,000 damage. So in a lot of cases, you'll be blowing up the card that your opponent plays. Obviously, your opponent gets to control what they lose. But the upside is that this card is actually pretty cheap in that it's 2 CP. So it's a pretty solid piece of like preparatory sort of removal. Downside is your opponent gets to choose. So if your opponent is playing cards with enter break zone abilities, then your opponent is able to trigger them off. Yeah, I definitely foresee situations where Ice just plays down a Renoa, forces a grenade to blow up in her face, and then dulls all you guys, and then just swings in for game. So potentially there are situations where this card can work against you, but I think in a lot of other cases, like in a majority of cases, this card's just going to be very, very solid. So yeah, so I think this card's very solid. It doesn't choose forwards, so like any sort of ability that makes them unchoosable by abilities will not prevent this grenade from going through. The way I sort of see this card is it's kind of a way to just like remove a body. So just like how Fire likes to use cards like Red Mage to make your opponent's forwards unblockable, this is kind of just like a 2 CP and a card to just make it so if your opponent wants to play a specific guy to like try to block you, or even it makes your opponent just like waste a card, this is just going to remove 1 body off the field for a very cheap cost, allowing you to sort of like tempo and continue aggressing as well. So this card's actually pretty reasonable, and I am going to try experimenting like 1 or 2 copies of this in specific decks I'm going to be trying to build. Next we have Manasvin Warmach. It is a 2-cost monster for Fire Dull. Choose one character. If it deals damage to a forward this turn, increases damage by 2,000 instead. So this card actually seems pretty good in my eyes. So yeah, so first of all, so like dulling a monster effectively like doesn't really have much of a cost because monsters generally aren't like attacking or blocking, and so you're just paying like 1 fire CP to use its ability to make a character deal an extra 2,000 damage each time it would deal damage this turn. So that's actually pretty solid in a couple of cases. So first of all, the fact that it can choose characters means that if you have backup abilities that are dealing damage, like even like stuff out of fire, like say for example if you're using Heroic Lulu, bumping that damage up by 2,000 is actually pretty solid. But also like in fire, any sort of situation where you are using spread type damages such as Machina or such as Vivi, making increasing the damage by 2,000 is actually very solid. It increases the damage of each each one of those packets of damage increases by 2,000 is actually very solid. I can definitely see in a situation where using Manasvin Warmach to buff up Machina and then using Guardian Blades pretty much like just destroys your opponent's field, in the sense that you're dealing 10,000 to one guy, then 6,000 to all the other guys, and then every time they die, you deal another 6,000. So yeah, you're dealing a lot of damage. So yeah, same with Vivi as well. This card actually seems very strong, even as like a combat trade. It allows you to trade up some of your smaller guys into much bigger guys for effectively just 1 fire CP. So it's very, very, very solid. I do like this card very much. And considering how the Opus 4 fire monsters weren't that great, it's great to see fire have like a powerful new monster in the form of this Warmach. So actually really interested to try this card out. Next, we have probably the best fire card of the set, Vermilion Bird Junior. So I've talked about this a little bit in some of our earlier spoilers, but this card, yeah, to refresh you guys that haven't really seen that video, 5 cost 9k body, so that's on curve. When Zuyu attacks, it gains first strike until the end of turn. When a forward damaged by Zuyu is put from the field into break zone on the same turn, activate Zuyu, it can attack once more this turn. And also for fire, for 1 fire, Vermilion Bird Zuyu gains haste until the end of the turn. So it's got 3 abilities and it's on curve. Anytime that happens, you got a really powerful card, and this card is definitely it. So basically, if this card is attacking and your opponent blocks and your opponent's forward dies, or yeah, if this deals a forward damage and then yeah, those forwards die, he gets reacted and attacked again in the same turn. So effectively, this means that this forward, in a lot of cases, is unblockable. In the sense that, like, if your opponent does block and their forward does die, then he gets to reactivate and continue attacking, and then like yeah, they keep going and going. The fact that he has first strike and the ability to gain haste is actually stupidly powerful as well. Considering he's got such a solid body, and because fire has plenty of ways to buff their attackers, giving him first strike basically allows him to just clear through any blockers. So yeah, this card basically says you cannot block me, and if you're at 6 damage, you lose. Because he's just going to crush through every forward that keeps trying to block him. Also, there are some cool synergies with this card in that if you're using a card like say the 2-cost Hecaton here that allows him to deal his damage to another forward, it does reactivate him as well. So yeah, so if he does attack through, you can use Hecaton here, destroy one of your opponent's forwards, reactivate him, and keep like charging in again. So there are really cool synergies with this card. Not to mention, this card, like that ability also can be used on defense, so you can use Hecaton here to destroy one of your opponent's forwards on their turn, and then that reactivates Zuyu and allows Zuyu to block one of their attackers. So it's actually a really strong ability, a lot of really good synergies with it, especially with Earth cards. Potentially I could see like, yeah, even if this card's dull, if you hit like an EX versus Raoban, he hits a guy, deals them damage, kills a guy, reactivates Zuyu, and he's ready to block. This card is so good, and especially in any sort of scenario where especially in any scenario where you're playing Earth Fire, this card is going to be unbelievably busted. So I am looking forward to trying to build some Fire Earth decks with this card, and really excited to show you guys what I come up with. Next we have Vermilion Bird Junior. It is a 4-cost EX burst. When this card enters the field, search for 1 category type 0 summon and add it to your hand. So there have not been any additional type 0 summons added to the game since we got them in Opus 3. So all we have is Ifrit, Dablos, and Odin. Yeah, obviously you will not be playing any of these summons unless you're playing a Cadets deck. Yeah, so this card has very limited scope outside of those decks. It's got an S ability, so for S Fire Dull, put 5 backups in the break zone, break all forwards and opponent controls. This card's S ability you generally never want to be using. They say, oh, use it as a last resort. Even as a last resort, like, unless you literally are about to lose, I do not foresee this ability ever being used. You have to put 5 of your backups in the break zone. You can't put your opponent's backups in the break zone, only yours. And it doesn't even say put all your backups in the break zone, put 5 backups in the break zone. So that means they have to be ones from your field, sent to the break zone, and you have to have 5. So you can't just like send like say 3 and that's all you can pay. You have to have the 5 altogether in order to do it. So it's a really expensive ability to use. I don't even know why they put double fire on a real talk. If they just made it like just S, even then like at S it would be like close to fair. Yeah, because you're spending 5 backups already, it should just be like S, destroy 5 backups, go. But you have to go fire dull, and that's like a stupidly high threshold for what this card costs you. So in that regard, I don't really see this card seeing that much play. Yeah, like even though it does have a synergy with Type 0, I don't really foresee it seeing that much play. Next, we have Warrior, 4 cost 8,000 power, 8,000 power forward, standard unit. No reason to play this, just play Samurai. It is exactly same stats, except it's got the bonus of if you have 5 or more damage, then it gets plus 1,000 power and Brave. So there's no reason to run this Warrior. Samurai has the same body with better stats. They're both standard units, and Samurais are cooler than Warriors, so don't play this card. Next, we have a Warrior that's actually good. So it's a 2 cost forward at 5,000 power, so it's on curve. When Warrior attacks, all 5 forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn. So this is actually really strong ability to have, especially on such a cheap forward. So effectively, this card, when it's attacking, is able to pump itself up to 7,000 power base. So yeah, it basically becomes a free cost power, like it becomes a free CP forward in terms of stats, but it also buffs all your other 5 forwards as well. So yeah, it's actually a really good value card. Yeah, it's really cheap as well. It's like body isn't that great, so it's not good for blocking, but it allows you to attack so very well. And especially for like fire, because it has a lot of sort of like mid-range and cheaper forwards that are really good, this card will slip into fire decks really well. Really excited to be trying a sort of like a mono fire deck using this card to just sort of help you guys push through. This is probably going to be the unsung or secret hero for fire this set. Next we have Tellah. It is a 3 cost backup. Dull, put Tellah into a break zone, choose one forward, deal it 7,000 damage. So it's very similar from the Tellah that we have from previous sets, where it dulls and breaks to deal 9,000 damage, although this is just a little bit scaled back, which is fair because this card is a 3 cost backup. It effectively like mirrors Brynhilda in that regard. It's got a secondary ability, which is Recall, S1 Dull, choose one forward, remove the top card of your deck from the game, deal it 4,000 damage for each CP required to play the remove card. So pretty much, in my opinion, unless you hit a 1 cost card, which, unless you're playing Evokers, most decks aren't really playing that many 1 cost cards. Also, like, I suppose Evokers and any sort of 1 cost summons, majority of the case, you're going to be dealing at least 8,000 damage. Yeah, or like in most cases, you just got to straight up kill guys, because you're going to be picking up cards that like cost 3 or 5. And yeah, free CP card is going to be like 12,000 damage, which is easy enough to kill anything. At like 4 or 5 costs, yeah, that's just overkill. So yeah, in a large amount of cases, it's pretty much going to be, unless you get unlucky, kill the forward. Yeah, so and it costs effectively 4 CP because you have to discard a card, so that's 2 CP there, and then spend another like 1 and then dull. So it's effectively 4 CP to at least deal 8,000 damage to a forward. Especially if you're a little bit more of a gambler, then definitely you can be aiming to hit for that 12k mark and hit something larger. So it does give you gambling options to hit bigger forwards when you need to. But by itself, it's actually not a bad card as well. So it does allow decks to run multiple copies of this, and allows you to discard them for like extra powerful effects. So actually, this card's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to test it out. Definitely more of a more fun or sort of gimmickier sort of deck, but definitely it brings a lot of value, and I actually think this is a solid card. Next we have Fighter. It is a 2 cost forward at 4,000 power. For 1 fire, choose 1 forward, deal it and Fighter 1,000 damage. It basically is just like a card that enables fire decks to just ping for 1k damage. Unfortunately, it has to deal itself 1000 damage, so if you ever have to use it more than 3 times a turn, then Fighter will generally kill itself unless it's got some sort of buffs on it. Because Fire has so many ways to deal packets of damage, this card will have its niche uses, especially any sort of situation where you're dealing 5 or 6k damage, and having like that extra 1 or 2,000 damage on top will like allow you lethal forwards out. Potentially, I could see it seeing play. But yeah, this card, like in general, not particularly good. And it seems like there are better options for Fire to like deal those extra packets of damage. Next, we have Ninja. It is a 2-cost backup for Dull. Put Ninja into Break Zone. Choose one forward, it cannot block this turn. So effectively, it is a cheaper, non-reusable form of Red Mage. So Red Mage has been a staple of Fire decks for a long time. So for Fire 1 Dull, choose a forward, it cannot block this turn. This gives you a very similar effect, or gives you fundamentally the same effect, but you have to break Ninja in order to do it. So there are some pros and cons to this. So one, obviously, is that you don't have to pay the CP costs, especially Fire 1 that is kind of expensive, in the sense that you have to like kind of spend the CP or discard a card to use Red Mage. So Ninja, you don't have to do that, but Ninja breaks itself, which does have its pros and cons. So if you are playing a Fire deck where you want to get certain backups down, Ninja does allow you to put itself down as like an early backup, and then you can break it to clear up space for some of your later game backups. So there are some benefits to that as well. Fire didn't really have too many like good 2-cost backups that break themselves. A lot of times decks would have to use Bard because Black Mage isn't nearly as good as it used to be. So this card is potentially does have potential to see play. Decks might potentially see themselves running like 2 and 2 like Ninja Red Mage, or like one Ninja 2 Red Mage, and so on. So there are some niche uses for this card, and potentially I could see Fire decks like sort of hedging their bets with some Red Mages and some Ninjas. Next, we have one of the Fire legendaries of the set, Palom. 5 costs forward at 4,000 power, so it is definitely significantly below the curve. But when Palom enters the field, if you control a card named Palom, draw 1 card. And when Palom enters the field, choose 1 forward, deal it 7,000 damage. And then a third ability, 2, Dull and active forward, choose 1 forward, deal it 1,000 damage. And everything about this card just screams mediocre to me. So first of all, body 4,000 power, it is not going to be winning any fights, except for forwards that have 3,000 power. And in a large majority of cases, forwards that have 3,000 power usually have some sort of evasive ability. So this card is not going to win any fights in general. First ability, yeah, if you control a Palom when you play this card, draw a card. So yeah, let's say if you do hit the trigger, it effectively becomes a 3-cost forward, 4,000 power. Still not on curve, still not particularly great. And like also, Palom generally has a very small body as well. So yeah, if your opponent has any sort of removal in response to this, you do not get to draw the card when you play this card. So that's kind of a downside. When Palom enters the field, choose 1 forward, deal at 7,000 damage. That's actually that's pretty solid. So if you do consider that you're getting the Palom effect of drawing a card, and then you're playing this card to deal 7,000 damage, it kind of makes it like a 7,000 power. No, makes it a 7,000 power nuke. That's a 3-cost forward. That's a 3-cost forward, and because the 7,000 like power nuke is kind of equivalent to a Brynhilde, then you can almost kind of say you're kind of getting a 4,000 power body for free. That being said, though, jumping through the hoop of having Palom on the field to make this just kind of on parity and having this like really small irrelevant body does not seem to be like a good payoff in my eyes for the setup. So this card just seems so weak. So weak, especially if you're jumping through that first hoop. And Palom is like, Palom is a pretty weak forward, and also forces you to play fire and water. This card is not very strong at all. Payoff isn't very good. And its final ability of paying 2, Dull and active forward, choose 1 forward, deal at 1,000 damage. Yeah, that is like real expensive. You're paying, so like straight up, if you just paid 2 CP to deal 1,000 damage, that would have been fine. That would have been balanced, right? But you have to Dull and active forward each time you do it, and that just, and like it's way more difficult to Dull active forwards and to pay CP in most cases. So yeah, this ability is like way too overcosted for what it does. So Palom, I think, might take. I'm pretty sure Palom might take the award for being worst legendary of this set. Don't play him unless you want a bad time. Talking about legendaries, however, we've got Phoenix. It is a 7-cost summon. choose one forward of cost 3 or less in your break zone, and up to one forward your opponent controls. Play the former onto the field dull and deal the latter 8,000 damage. So in real English, choose one forward of cost 3 or less from your break zone, put it onto the field, and deal one of your opponent's forwards 8,000 damage. Yeah, it is an expensive summon, costing 7, but you are getting a free cost or less forward from your break zone onto the field. So it kind of makes this card paying for like spending 3 CP to summon a forward and like 4 CP to deal 8,000 damage, which is pretty fair. It does give you the benefit of playing your forward in instant speed or like playing it on your opponent's turn. So that's a pretty good benefit as well. We did talk about this card in some of the earlier spoilers. So yeah, there are definitely a ton of cards that this can be useful for. You can pull in forwards that have enter field abilities. You can pull in forwards that have ongoing type abilities. So yeah, Phoenix has creates situations where you can surprise your opponent in a lot of situations. But yeah, if we're going to rehash it, at that time, Y'shtola wasn't announced, but now that Y'shtola has been revealed and Y'shtola has the ability to cancel summons or auto abilities, then Phoenix has just gotten another great target. Yeah, has gotten another great target to add to its portfolio of forwards that it can bring onto the field. So I think definitely Fire is going to be struggling with space in terms of like which Fire summons to put into this deck, but this card inherently is a solid card, and definitely if decks are running more sort of like mid-rangey free cost forwards, then potentially this card seems very, very solid. Next we have Volker. It is a 4-cost 8,000 power forward. When Volker or category 11 forward enters your field, choose one forward that cannot block this turn. And Vorpal Blade, so just for S, choose one blocking forward, break it. So both these effects seem pretty solid, but they're limited by the card pool. So this card is on curve, but yeah, so its first ability of making a forward unable to block this turn. Obviously, yeah, if there were more category 11 forwards, then this card would be actually pretty good. But right now in Fire, we only seem to have Volker and Ayame, and then like pretty much the only other forwards of category 11 do seem to be Prish. So you've only got like at most like I think 3 or 4 targets. Actually, there might be some other stuff. I think Camlonaut and Eldnark. I think they might be category 11 forwards. But yeah, the amount of category 11 forwards in this game are very, very limited right now. So you're not going to be triggering off this ability that often. You can't really build a deck around this guy. You're not going to be able to play this guy and just curve out forwards every turn and make your opponent unable to block. So yeah, so its first ability is very limited because of the card pool. Second ability limited as well because there's only 1 copy of Volker. Choose one blocking forward, break it. That is a very strong ability. Yeah, so Volker is one of those cards that is only going to get better and better with time when there are more cards that are going to be able to support him. As soon as we see more F11 forwards and like have another copy of Volker, this card is going to be unbelievably good. But at this stage, he's just very much limited by the card pool. Next card is Mitsuki. It is a 2-cost backup, another Agido Cadet. So for 1 dull, choose one forward, deal 1,000 damage. This is just okay. Dealing 1,000 damage can like just bump you up enough to be able to like kill forwards. Yeah, it's just strictly okay. It's a 2-cost backup, which like decks need to use, and yeah, just like it's a very cheap way, just like 1 dull, deal 1,000 damage. Not particularly flashy, but that's all you need sometimes. It can just like by itself give your opponent reasons not to attack and not to block because you are able to trade up with that extra 1,000 damage. So this card is okay. It's not bad. In a situation where you don't really have much else going for you, you can chuck a copy of this card in your deck, and you'd be surprised at like occasionally how useful this card's going to be. Next, we have Pai-via. It is a 3-cost backup. When Pai-via enters the field, all forwards you control cannot be broken this turn. So effectively gives your entire field a blanket stabbing effect for the turn. Yeah, like obviously this card is generally only good if you already have forwards on the field, but Fire generally like is pretty good with that. Yeah, making all your forwards unbreakable for a turn is pretty solid. It doesn't make it so your forwards can't be broken from their own pain ability. So any sort of abilities that blow your own forwards up in order to use the ability, Pai-via does not sort of protect against that. But otherwise, it means that they can't be destroyed by combat. It can't be destroyed by sort of destruction abilities. So it is pretty solid in that regard. And if you have a couple of forwards on the field, this allows you to just like go swinging in. Yeah, potentially like this card might see play in a more like fire orientated like Final Fantasy VI deck, just because you generally got a lot of forwards on the field, and because with Cyan they have Brave, you have no reason not to attack. You check down a Pai-via and they just go in with all your Brave guys. and generally your opponent has a very tough time blocking you or trading against you. So yeah, this card like has its uses in niche cases, but it does seem a little bit gimmicky, like in situations where you don't sort of have a good field position already. But yeah, otherwise, like I can potentially see this card seeing play in a more aggressive fire deck, where if you sort of want to like build up some backups and you've got like 2 or 3 forwards on the field, and you want to aggressively attack your opponent, but your opponent's got like one big blocker, chuck a Pai-via down, go in with 3 of your guys. Your opponent's going to be able to block maybe one of them, but you'll generally be able to get 1 or 2 guys through. So yeah, so this card is actually surprisingly good. And yeah, if fire does see more play, I do think that this card is probably going to see like a 1-off or potentially 2-off. Next, we have Raid. It's a free cost 9,000 power forward, so it's on curve. But Raid does not activate during your active phase. When a forward you control is put from the field into break zone, activate Raid. This card, it's hard to sort of like figure out what the use of this card is. So this card is a forward that's larger than its curve, so it is 2,000 CP larger than what you would expect from it. But because it doesn't activate during your active phase, it doesn't make it a particularly good attacker, because you have to waste resources to reactivate him. So he's not particularly good as an attacker. Potentially he's good as a blocker, right? So like if he's not a good attacker, then potentially you can use him as a blocker, right? Even as a blocker, yes, 9,000 power is pretty solid at free. But yeah, like there's a lot of ways to like have removal abilities. There's a lot of removal abilities in the game, especially a lot of cards that would just hate out forwards at a cost free. So yeah, so like even as a blocker, he doesn't seem particularly reliable. Generally, you want any sort of your, like if you do need a blocker type forward, you generally want one that's got like a more defensive ability. And like yeah, this card has no positive abilities, and its entire drawback basically justifies the fact that it's got a slightly bigger body. In that regard, I don't think the body really sort of justifies his limitation. Yeah, so even though you can reactivate him every time one of your forwards is sent to the break zone, it's not something you generally really want to be doing in most cases, sacrificing forwards just to potentially block one more forward or just potentially attack. So yeah, this card doesn't seem too impressive, and I don't think the payoff is really worth it for using this card. Next, we have Luneth. So this is a cycle of 4 Warrior Light cards that give all your guys buffs. So it's a free cost 7,000 power forward. Job Warrior Light forwards and fire forwards other than Luneth you control gain plus 1,000 power. Dull a total of 3 active fire forwards or fire backups. Choose 1 forward, deal at 2,000 damage. So first to clarify, the first ability, so Job Warrior Light forwards and fire forwards other than Luneth. So this is like, so it's not Warrior of Lights gain plus 1,000 and fire forwards get plus 1,000. So yeah, so if you have a fire Warrior Light, it doesn't get the buff twice. So it's basically anything that's either of these categories gets plus 1,000 power. So yeah, so it doesn't. So cards that meet both conditions don't get the buff twice. So that's the first thing to note. Next thing to note is his ability of dull and active or free fire forwards with 5 backups. Choose a forward, deal at 2,000 damage. That's actually pretty solid. So yeah, we'll do like this. This is like kind of a common thread that we've been talking about this entire video of like how much CP is dealing 1,000 or 2,000 damage worth. Yeah, I think this game, they tend to overcost small ping effects, because yeah, if you like undercost them, then they have like a very sort of oppressive control type sort of feel to the deck, and I think that they don't really want fire to have like that overwhelming like oppressive ping damage control. So that's why they make these sort of like ping damages a little bit like more overcosted. That being said, the cost for it is actually not too bad. So you're paying effectively 3 CP to deal 2k damage, but the fact that you can really do this at any point and you can split it up between active forwards and active backups is actually gives you a lot of flexibility. So so a lot of people, like a few people I've heard just like really crapped on this card, says this is probably the worst out of all of them. Yeah, I actually don't think it's too bad. I think it might be like the second worst. So I definitely do think Refi is probably the best or second best. Then Ingus, probably Luneth, and then I think personally, in my personal opinion, I'd put Arc much lower than Luneth. But so yeah, so I think this card's actually quite well, like the second ability is quite reasonable, and the fact that you're giving all your fire forwards plus 1,000 power is just solid anyways, right? Fire likes to fight, and giving all your guys plus 1,000 power. Potentially, yeah, we can see sort of like this more like sort of early to mid-range fire deck where you just have like guys that cost 2 or cost 3 that they get up to like 8,000, 9,000 power simply because you got more dudes on the field. So yeah, this card will see play both in the Warrior Light deck and probably like in sort of mono fire, sort of like aggressive forward based decks. And that's it for the fire cards of this set. I hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely let me know what you guys thought of cards. So if you guys have any cool, interesting ideas, definitely chuck them in the comment section below. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. If you did enjoy this video, please thumbs up and subscribe. It helps with the YouTube algorithm and gets those videos out there. Otherwise, stay tuned tomorrow. I'll get the iStudio out. Until then, branch out.